and welcome to American Friction, the US politics podcast that honestly can't stand the heat wave at the moment. I'm Melting, and I'm Chris Jones. No job today, he's escaped the heat and keeps sending me pictures of supermarkets in Slovenia. I wish he wouldn't, but he is, so what can you do? But someone who is not sending me pictures of Slovenia, and also the supermarkets that are in Slovenia, and is here with me right now is Rolling Stone politics reporter Nikki McCann Ramirez. Hello, Nikki, and also, happy birthday.
Thank you so much, Chris. I have been sending Chris photos of dogs I encounter on my walks.
She has, and they're very nice-looking dogs.
They're all very good dogs.
And we really do appreciate it. Jarv, take note. Right, on today's show, Trump's big, beautiful bill struggled to get through the Senate, but what shape is it in now? And Trump and Musk are back at each other's throats, and this time it's even nastier. Then, in the second half of the show, Trump has a new horrifying method for escape-proof prisons. What really is Alligator Alcatraz, and is he serious? As well as some listener questions. But before we get into all of that, a silly question from me to you, Nikki, just to lighten up the mood really before we really descend into the depths of hell today. As we've mentioned, it was your birthday recently. Again, I hope you had a great time. I hope you had a nice one.
I did.
My question this week is, what's the best replacement for a birthday cake? Just imagine you're in a world where birthday cakes are banned. Can't have them. What's the best replacement?
Like for me specifically?
Specifically for you, yep.
Okay, it would probably be one of those like giant wheels of cheese that you like cut open and like melt with the blowtorch. Just like...
Oh, like raclette.
Yeah, I love raclette. Yeah, so just like give me one of those. Give me like my little plate of things that I can just cover in cheese, a giant stack of tortillas. I'll be good. I'm great.
That's pretty decent, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't thought of cheese, but I do actually know the correct answer. And cheese is very close. The correct answer is actually a Melton Mowbray pork pie.
What now?
A Melton Mowbray pork pie.
I don't know what that is.
So it's a big pork pie.
Okay, big pork pie.
So Melton Mowbray is a place from in Leicestershire, where I'm from. It's a little bit like champagne in the sense that you can't call champagne if it's not made in Champagne. You can't call
this pot pie.
No, you can't call it pork. You can't call it Melton Mowbray pork pie unless it's made in Melton Mowbray. It's like protected status kind of vibe.
Okay.
And it's got like it's just basically delicious pork inside a pastry casing. There's also jelly there as well. And I'm less keen on the jelly, I'll be honest.
What kind of jelly?
Is it called aspic? I think it's called aspic.
Oh, okay, yeah, I know of aspic.
Flavorless.
Very like 1960s cooking magazine.
Very much so, yeah. This is basically what pork pies are there. You can just eat them with your hand, but the best one to replace a birthday cake, just a massive one. Just a massive one that you can slice into.
With like a giant candle. It just shoots off flames. I love this for you.
I will have that one day. Haven't yet.
That seems really attainable.
No, it is. And you can get special ones with the pastry is just like, it's got all the writing on. It's just an absolute dream. And if anyone's listening and wants to get me a big pork pie, just send to me. I'd be very appreciative. Anyway, let's get on with the show. Welcome back. You're listening to American Friction. Right, before we get into it, we need your support to keep going. We love making the show, but it ain't cheap. So that's why we need your backing on Patreon. For as little as £3 a month, you'll get the show ad-free, and other tiers will get you access to bonus content and merch. And if you do decide to sign up to the £5 a month or more tier, we have a Patreon chat community where we can all come together to talk about US politics and get to the bottom of the things that are making our heads scratch the most together. That would be nice, wouldn't it? So what are you waiting for? Follow the link in the show notes or go to patreon.com/American Friction to sign up. Right, on with the show. This week, the Senate passed the big, beautiful bill after what has been called a record vote-a-rama. It was sent back to the House on Wednesday after a Senate tie was broken by Vice President J.D. Vance. First, Nikki, what the hell is a vote-a-rama?
So, as we've discussed multiple times on this show, the legislative process in the United States has gotten incredibly convoluted, particularly in this era where because there is such gridlock, legislation doesn't necessarily get passed as, individual bills related to one specific topic. It's these massive omnibus bills that are just jammed with every single thing a party wants to pass in that moment. And so what typically happens in with a bill of this nature, a reconciliation bill, is, it'll get introduced on the floor of the Senate. You can theoretically do some procedural stuff to skip the reading of the bill. In this case, because Democrats are trying to stall the passage of the big, beautiful bill, which in amendments is no longer named the big, beautiful bill. That's been stricken from the record. Because they're trying to stall its passage as long as possible, they had the Senate parliamentarian read all 900 pages of the bill just to kind of give more time, because they're trying to do two things here. One is, if you can stall enough, maybe you can have Republicans miss the July 4th sort of deadline that Trump imposed on them. I don't think that's going to happen, but, the more you stall, the harder it is, the more time you have. And then the more time they take to get on the floor, talk to voters, do media hits, get on TV and talk about this, the more it looks like Republicans are having trouble forcing this through the Senate, through the House. That's more time for constituents, activist groups to call representatives, senators, and be like, hey, this legislation is fucked up and you shouldn't pass it. And if you do pass it, we're going to hold you accountable. So, bill was introduced. It was read. After that, you get a period of debate where everyone gets to talk about the bill and their feelings about it. And it goes back and forth and For this bill, it was 20 hours of debate, split evenly between the two parties. Democrats used pretty much every single second of their 10 hours. Republicans did not. And after that, you go into what are called amendments. In the case of a reconciliation bill and other bills like it, a vote-a-rama is essentially a time period where you can submit as many amendments and changes as you want to the bill, and the chamber will just keep voting back to back to back to back to back. It's vote after vote after vote after vote, essentially until they run out of amendments and close the amendment time. And the vote-a-rama for this bill, this bill has broken so many fucking records, but this was the longest vote-a-rama in Senate history. Last night in the House, we'll talk about it a bit later, they had the longest vote in the history of the House. So there's been a lot of delays because I think it's abundantly clear that this Frankenstein piece of legislation that was produced by the House, sent to the Senate, amended, scrapped, rewritten. A lot of the minutia is still stuff we're learning, they cut out this provision. They are removing a tax on silencers for firearms. But the meat of the bill, it is fundamentally the codification of tax breaks for the wealthy at the expense of the poor and working class. That is undeniable. That remains the heart of the legislation. And it is incredibly unpopular. And when you have Republicans fighting amongst themselves about this bill, when you have senators saying they're not going to run for re-election because they cannot in good conscience vote for this law, and they know that if they vote no, they will be kicked out of office by the MAGA faction of the party, it's absurdist. We are basically shooting the country in the foot so that Donald Trump can sign a bill on the 4th of July.
So coming to what you said there about GOP members kind of butting heads around this, is one of the reasons that it took so long to get through the Senate down to some kind of Republican rebellion, or is that just not right?
Rebellion is generous.
Okay.
Rebellion would imply that these people have a moral backbone and that they're willing to stand up to the authoritarian that heads their party. They do not. We had 3 Republican senators defect and vote alongside Democrats. Rand Paul of Kentucky, Tom Tillis of North Carolina, and Susan Collins of Maine. It's important here to remember that there were 2 factions of Republicans that are opposing this bill amongst the GOP caucus as a whole. It's the people who are Rand Paul, libertarian deficit hawks, small government weirdos, who basically think that this bill is not draconian enough. that we need to cut more from Medicaid, that we need to roll back more social safety net programs, that if we're increasing the debt, then we need to like actually slit the throat of every government program that like, you know, is quote unquote part of the welfare state. The Rand Pauls of the universe are the ones who are voting against it because of that. And then you have a smaller, more like wishy-washy coalition of Republicans, and I wouldn't even call it a coalition because I don't think they've had like a unified front. The deficit hawks have been much more unified in their opposition, who are willing to say, yeah, this bill is going to kick people in my state off of Medicaid. It's going to be bad for hospitals in the region I was elected to represent. It is a travesty that we are doing this, and I cannot in good conscience vote for it. One of those people was Tom Tillis. And Tom Tillis also, alongside announcing that he wasn't going to vote for this bill, announced that he is not running for re-election because Donald Trump put a target on his back and basically said, I will primary you out of existence. I will personally ensure that you do not make it back into office if you vote no on this bill. He's done that to several other members of Congress, particularly in the House, like Thomas Massie, who's a deficit hawk.
Yeah.
But we cannot call it a rebellion because in the Senate, you had people like Josh Hawley and Lisa Murkowski who know this bill is horrible. Josh Hawley was writing op-eds in the New York Times calling cuts to Medicaid political suicide that like broke the pact that the MAGA movement had made with working class people. He voted for it anyway. And the reason he and people like Lisa Murkowski, who was also like, I have deep concerns about what these cuts to Medicaid will do to the people in Alaska. She voted for it anyway because these people have made the calculus that they are much more willing to pay the temporary political price of some bad press related to this vote than the price of pissing off the MAGA movement and losing their seat. The other problem we encounter here, which we have talked about a lot, is that you have a government of people who are so attached to the idea of power that they are not willing to actually do the work of representative governance, of representing the interests of the people that they were elected to represent, if it means potentially losing access to power. Because the only silver lining amongst the absolute pile of shit that is probably going to be passed by the House today, it will kill people. Because it will take 11 million people off of their health care. It will kick 2 million people every month off of food assistance programs. And those 2 million people are attached to over 1 million children in the United States who now every month will lose access to food assistance. It's going to kill jobs in red states because it rolls back a ton of the climate and green energy subsidies that were created under the Inflation Reduction Act. It's going to give massive tax cuts to the wealthy and fuck over the poor. And it gives some marginal benefits to working people. No tax on tips is good. I've talked about it before, how Republicans use these sort of shiny looking policies like no tax on tips and no tax on Social Security as a nice rhetorical cover for the really deep cuts they're making that will affect people more broadly. All that steaming pile of shit, the one silver lining is that Democrats now going into the 2026 midterms and the 2028 elections will get to point to lawmakers, Republican lawmakers, who said, oh, this bill is bad, but I'm going to vote for it anyway, and tell MAGA voters, Republican voters, these people betrayed you. These people said that they would protect your health, protect your wealth, protect your ability to function in this economy. And what did they do? They kicked you off healthcare and they took away government assistance, which vast chunks of Medicaid and SNAPs and other welfare programs benefit rural Americans in Republican states. And that's the thing that we're not talking about enough here, that it's not the 35-year-old who sits on their couch and plays video games all day and doesn't want to work who's on Medicaid. 35-year-old, able-bodied 35-year-olds are not on Medicaid. Because Medicaid is what you use when you need to pay for healthcare but don't have insurance. Like a healthy 35-year-old is is just a healthy 35-year-old who isn't leeching off the medical system because they're healthy. The people who are going to be affected by this are young children, mothers, like elderly people, people in rural areas who the only like form of medical coverage they have access to is Medicaid. Those are the people Republicans are fucking over, and they know they're fucking them over, and that's why it's been so hard to pass this bill.
And also, then, just to sum up, the process that this has been through. I mean, you've given a good account there of, I think you called it a steaming pile of shit, which is essentially, I would tend to agree with you there. But is this worse now than when it arrived on the doorstep?
Oh, 100%. 100%. When it arrived in the Senate from the House, it was bad, but it was like, I think the jump was something from like 8 million people were going to lose health insurance to now it's like 11 million baseline. And then they think it could be up to 17 million in some of the estimates I've seen, because not only are they making these cuts to Medicaid, they're also rewriting a lot of the rules about ACA, Affordable Care Act subsidies that were Obamacare, quote unquote, and making it more difficult for people to buy insurance plans through the public options. So they also think that several more millions of people are going to get forced off of their private insurance, like public-private insurance, because it's going to be more difficult to get on ACA plans. It's the reason the Affordable Care Act was created was because the healthcare system in the United States is so broken that before Obama, you had this massive problem of like millions and millions of people in the United States being uninsured. And I know it's like a weird concept for you Brits because y'all just get that shit for free.
Yeah.
But it was becoming a huge financial burden on hospitals, on states, everything. And the idea was if you kind of create this like public-private partnership, expand Medicaid, and help people get insurance, get healthcare coverage, that ultimately saves people money. It brings down costs, everything. And what this bill will do is roll back essentially all of the gains. There will be massive rollbacks to the gains that have been made since the ACA was passed regarding getting more Americans on healthcare coverage. And when the system is set up that if all these people lose Medicaid, particularly in rural areas where hospitals and clinics depend on Medicaid payments to stay open, you're going to have entire communities not just lose not just lose access to health insurance, but be completely cut off from the healthcare system because the rural healthcare institutions that provide those services won't be able to stay open. The thing is, we know this is going to happen. Everyone knows this is going to happen, and they are passing it anyway.
But then let's just bring it to now then. It's back in the House as we speak. I think last time I looked, Hakeem Jeffries was doing a big old speech.
A very long old speech. Yeah.
So can we presume that this is gonna pass through the House now that it's gone through the Senate? And then if we do presume that, obviously Trump will sign it. What then? Do we just have to deal with the consequences of it?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm just gonna start for our listeners in the UK, people who don't necessarily know. The reason it's back in the House is because since you made changes to it in the Senate and you have to have approval from both chambers, I know there's like the schoolhouse rock that it's like, oh, the bill goes to the House and then it goes to the Senate and then it goes to the president. Not really. Regardless of where it starts, if it starts in the Senate, if it starts in the House, it has to go to the other chamber, they'll make their changes, and then it has to go back to the original chamber so they can rubber stamp those changes. So we expect that it will pass the House today. As you said, Hakeem Jeffries is doing a magic minute filibuster. Yeah. Basically, once debate ends, there's a special rule that allows party leadership to basically have an eternal minute to talk about the bill. I think we're currently in hour 5, creeping up on hour 6. But yeah, and in the House, it's also been pretty sloppy. As I mentioned earlier, last night, Republicans kind of messed up a procedural rule vote. And if the vote, I forget what the rule, it's just like they call it the rule vote. I don't know what the specific rule is. But if the rule vote failed, they would have gone pretty much directly into the final vote to pass the bill. And at that time, it was very clear that Johnson and Republicans didn't have the votes they needed to pass it. The deficit hawks were once again being like, no, we're going to tank this shit. So Mike Johnson held the rule vote open for 7 hours last night. It became the longest vote in the history of the House, while Republicans basically like browbeat the holdouts into passing it. I don't know. I was asleep for most of it because this is already too stressful, and I do not care to sit there and watch C-SPAN and be like, oh my God, Mike Johnson is approaching so-and-so. It looks like an angry conversation. I'm not going to do that. But yeah, once it passes, Trump was very adamant that he wanted this bill on his desk by the 4th of July. And again, I cannot stress like how much of this is happening. Primarily, it's because Republicans know that if the 2017 tax cuts expire and there's like a massive bump in corporate tax rates, if people's taxes go up because they let those cuts expire, it will be extremely bad for them electorally. But another non-negligible reason for why this is happening now and in the way it is happening is because Trump was like, I want to sign a bill on the 4th of July. And they couldn't just throw him some like rinky-dink shit, making some fucking random day, Trump Day, which he would fucking love and would be stupid but inconsequential to the rest of us. No, they are jamming this legislation down our throats. They know it's bad. And once it's signed, like with most pieces of legislation like this, there are going to be some immediate things. There are going to be some like immediate legislative changes that you see. But things like the Medicaid cuts, the SNAP cuts, those are going to be slow rolling disasters. Because Republicans, of course, insist like, no. We're not cutting Medicaid. We're protecting Medicaid. We're protecting Medicaid from the evil 35-year-old, from the fraudulent weirdos. And I don't know if I've explained this. I think I've explained this on another episode. But the way they're essentially doing it is by making a bunch of new rules and adding essentially red tape for Medicaid and SNAP recipients that makes it more cumbersome for them to not only get access to the benefit, but then to stay on the benefit. So they're like upping work requirements and reporting requirements. And if you're, receiving SNAP, which is like food assistance, and every month you have to like go do a check-in or file paperwork or confirm that like your job was this much and the income you made with this month was that much. It's so much like bureaucratic bullshit that at a certain point, if like you have a job and a family and responsibilities to take care of, it's also just like, fuck. Like, I don't know if I can keep this up. It's a lot of work. And they're doing similar things to Medicaid. So they're saying, oh, we're not cutting Medicaid, but they are basically instituting mechanisms that will tacitly remove people from these programs in order to bring down spending, because the less people you have on the program, the less you spend on it. And that's going to take time. It's going to take time for those effects to start being felt. But I think you'll start seeing it when like clinics start closing and rural hospitals start downsizing. I spoke to a hospital group executive out of New Mexico, which has one of the highest percentages of Medicaid patients in the nation. And he was like, I have half a dozen rural hospitals that if this law goes into effect, they will probably close within 18 months.
Wow.
And that's like, and one of the things he and I talked about was this notion that for a lot of people, those rural hospitals, they might be 50 miles away from them, but that's the closest hospital they have. And if that closes, they then have to drive 100 and something miles to get to a hospital. So it's going to be slow. It's going to take time. But we've seen, the thing is like the United States has also accidentally done experiments of this nature where it's become abundantly clear that the states that took Medicaid expansions under the ACA have much better health metrics than the states that didn't. Those kinds of things. Like, we know what happens when you cut Medicaid spending, when you get people off the program. It ends up increasing costs for states and communities. And we know what we're walking into, and it's just going to take time. And by the time we get to the midterms, I think you'll start seeing some of those effects if they're not in full force by that point.
Well, someone who's hoping to have an effect, and he's back, it's Elon Musk. He's come back, and this time, Nikki, he means business.
Oh, I'm sure he does.
He really means business.
I'm really sure he does.
Yeah, and he said this. He said, every member of Congress who campaigned on reducing government spending and then immediately voted for the biggest debt increase in history should hang their head in shame, and they will lose their primary next year. If it's the last thing I do on this earth, how seriously should we take Musk here? I mean, look, he's very rich, and with money does come power, but you know.
I mean, he has a lot of money. And I think you should take him seriously. I think this is a man who is not able to control his impulses. And we've seen it in the way his companies have reacted to him over the course of the last year.
Yeah.
He made like a big show, and we talked about it in a previous episode. Go back into it and listen to it, listener. But this idea that Elon Musk, his own companies, were sort of quietly leaking reports being like, oh yeah, we're looking for a new CEO if he doesn't, leave the Trump administration and get back to work. And in response, Musk made a really big, he was also pissing off everyone in the Trump administration while this was happening, and became the face of very unpopular actions. So he made a big show of being like, oh, I'm taking a step away from politics. I'll still be here to like advise Trump informally. But, I just, like, my work here is done. Within 5 minutes, he was back to posting about the bill when it was in the House, threatening to primary people, threatening to start his own political party. This is a man who understands that corporate power is one thing, but if you can actually buy the government and have a ton of corporate power, you're set. You can basically run the world, especially with the amount of money and influence Musk has. That all being said, like, again, I think it's another sign of the moral hollowness that is infected the entire Republican Party.
Yeah.
That the issue people have, or Republicans have, with this legislation is, it raises the deficit. Not that, like, people might actually die because they're going to lose health insurance.
Yeah.
But, the math, the money. And to be clear, increasing the deficit is very bad. Increasing the deficit because you want to ensure that billionaires and rich people keep the tax cuts you gave them 8 years ago is bad. But Musk isn't being serious when he talks, like, no one who's been involved in Republican politics in recent memory actually believes that the majority of the party is committed to fiscal responsibility anymore. It's just not the case. The Republican Party as a whole has determined that the political cost of raising the deficit, raising the debt limit, is short-term annoyance from, like, the media and their detractors. Long-term, no one gives a shit. To most voters, the debt and the American debt is a bad thing, but it's this really amorphous theoretical thing that they don't necessarily feel in their day-to-day lives. Whereas things like cutting healthcare, that's something really immediate. And Republicans have now understood that, the debt is bad and we should get it under control. And this is all, okay, to be fair, it's a very bipartisan thing that everyone's like, oh, the fucking debt, but we keep raising the debt limit and we keep spending money, and we keep punishing working class people whenever we do have to pass legislation that creates more debt, whenever we give tax cuts to rich people that then we have to pay for by cutting Medicare. And I don't take seriously people like Elon Musk when they say, oh, I'm so mad about the deficit that I'm going to launch a new political party. You're not going to launch a new political party whose central focus is the deficit. You're going to launch a political party that is aligned with the political priorities of Elon Musk, which is deregulation and giving me contracts. And every politician who aligns with that movement will likely fall into that same cycle, which is they'll talk a big game about the fucking deficit, but when it actually comes time to pass legislation, they will once again screw over poor people in order to pay for tax cuts to the wealthy, which is what increases the deficit, is tax cuts to the wealthy, because you lose tax revenue. And when you lose revenue, you go, like, anyway.
Yeah. I mean, any political party started by Elon Musk is purely going to be a vanity project for him, essentially.
Yeah.
There's no way getting around that. Anyway, back to this feud. Just before we move on to our next section, Trump responded to Elon Musk's threats, and he basically threatened him with an investigation by Doge and also to deport him. I mean, this is getting pretty, like, well, it's already ugly, but it's getting a lot uglier. But also, this just proves that Trump will try to oust or just get rid of any political opponent or just anyone, really, who stands against him and what he stands for, which, correct me if I'm wrong, that's incredibly authoritarian, is it not?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I am no fan of Elon Musk, but the price of speaking out against your government should be, oh, I disagree with you, or like, I don't think that's right, not, oh, I'm going to deport you and strip you of your contracts. I do think Elon Musk should be stripped of his contracts. I don't think the reason for that should be he criticized the president. I think the reason is it's a massive conflict of interest.
Yeah.
And it's like granting too much power to an unelected person. But it's a pattern we're seeing a lot from Trump these days. I've talked about, his targeting of Tom Tillis, of Thomas Massie, of Republicans who have opposed this legislation. The way he's targeted New York mayoral candidate Zoran Mamdani.
Yeah.
Who, because of the like Islamophobic rumors and bullshit that Republicans have circulated in the aftermath of his winning the primary, Trump is now talking about like personally tanking his candidacy and investigating him as like a criminal who should be deported. It's what we saw in the last couple months of the Trump administration targeting pro-Palestinian activists, stripping them of their visas and attempting to deport them, arresting Mahmoud Khalil on no charges and holding him for, like, I think it was 3 months in prison, uncharged, because he was an activist at Columbia University, because he disagreed with what the American government is doing in Gaza. Speaking of university protests, the manner in which the Trump administration is stripping major U.S. universities of funding, of their ability to accept international students, because they don't like the politics of the university. The First Amendment is dead in this country, at least under this administration. I mean, you had that report of that young man who was denied entry into the United States because he had a JD Vance meme on his phone.
Yeah.
Like, we've crossed the Rubicon at this point, and if the president can sit there and hand select the people he wants to punish, be it with deportations or stripping of visas or arrest and detainment, like, it's fucked. Like, how do we come back from that?
I'm never going to be able to get back into America, am I, Nikki?
Probably not, sorry.
Fuck's sake. Right, now to round up some of the stories that you may or may not have missed, and this first one is, it's incredible. Trump was visiting the Alligator Alcatraz Migrant Detention Center in Florida on Tuesday when he was asked about whether the facility was designed so that escapees would be eaten by surrounding wildlife like alligators or snakes. He replied, "I guess that's the concept." Nikki, what? Just tell us a bit more about this detention center. It's just another way Trump's proving to be a piece of shit, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, the way I've been explaining this to people is that it's been clear for a while now that Trump wants a secot, a terrorism confinement center, his own version of the prison in El Salvador where he sent all the Venezuelan detainees. He wants a scary-looking prison where he can show up and do tours and like stage propaganda videos. It's the reason really early on in the administration, he was like, oh, I'm going to reopen Guantanamo. Oh, I'm going to reopen Alcatraz. The problem with like Guantanamo and Alcatraz is they're incredibly expensive to run. Alcatraz has been a museum for 50 years. It hasn't had an inmate in over 60 years. The like cost to it's fucked up as a whole. Like Guantanamo is a black stain on the soul of this country. It is a notorious detention camp where people were tortured and abused and like judicially held for years outside of the bounds of like constitutional law. But like Alcatraz, the cost to remodel it into a workable prison is fucking astronomical. Enter Alligator Alcatraz, an insane idea that is now a real thing. This is a concentration camp that the government of Florida is building in the middle of the Everglades. It's basically, now that we've seen photos of it, it's like big plastic tents. I don't know how much people know about the Florida Everglades, but it's hot and humid there and full of mosquitoes. So you're in a plastic tent, and then they set up cages. They look like dog kennels. And then in those cages, they're like bunk beds. And that's, I guess, where they're keeping the migrants. I heard it can hold up to 5,000 migrants. It's built on top of an old abandoned airstrip. So what the government of Florida is saying is this is going to be a one-stop shop for deportation. They're going to bring in the migrants. They're going to deputize guards to act as administrative judges. So literally, the guards at this detention center will be your judge and jailer to like authorize the deportations. And DeSantis kind of like smarmily during this tour was like, yeah, we'll have guards deputized as judges so they'll get their due process because that's a thing that matters now. And then since they have a runway, put people on the flights and deport them straight from the center and from this center. And the whole thing they've been mucking about regarding this place is it's the Florida Everglades. So the surrounding wetlands are full of like alligators and snakes and other horrendous reptiles you wouldn't want to encounter in the wild. Again, I cannot overstate how disturbing it is that we are being governed by an administration of people who openly fantasizes about having migrants mauled to death by wild animals. Like, it's like Colosseum style shit. You know, like, what if I put you in this pit with lions? Wouldn't that be entertaining for me? And you had Laura Loomer, an advisor to the president, tweet just on Wednesday that, Alligator Alcatraz, there are like 60 million meals for the alligators in the Florida Everglades. 60 million is the population of Latinos in the United States.
Yeah.
That's a woman openly fantasizing about the murder of 60 million people because they are Latino. Forget undocumented. That number was the total amount of Latinos in the United States, legal, migrant, undocumented, whatever. That is the situation we are dealing with. So I have no problem calling this a concentration camp.
Well, it is, yeah.
The administration is envisioning it as a place where people will be subjected to cruel conditions because of the inherent environment, and then extra danger because of the surrounding reptilian-infested wetland. And, that's cruel and unusual, and it's fucked up, and it's weird. And the thing that is really with me is that Kristi Noem, Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis are all like, oh, isn't this a great model for other places?
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to build more of these. We're going to build a whole network of these.
Yeah. And then, but also just like if anyone's been paying attention to the news coverage of this, they're walking around in this area with like fucking awful smirks on their faces, looking around as if this place is an incredible invention. The whole news coverage, just being there, looks like a massive circus show. But also, Nikki, they've got fucking merch.
Yeah.
There's merch for this place. I don't
The Florida
get it.
Republican Party. Yeah, the Florida Republican Party is selling like hats, t-shirts, koozies with like Alligator Alcatraz.
It's
because
just, ugh.
no, it's torture porn.
Yeah.
These people love the idea of migrants, of Latinos. They love the idea of seeing these people suffer. They want non-white people in this country to suffer. And it's been a quiet bubbling for years. It's had periods where it's become more explicit. In my lifetime, this is probably the most explicit it has ever been. It is people like Laura Loomer tweeting out 60 million people are going to get eaten by alligators. It's not about undocumented people. It is about migrants. It is about immigrant communities. It is about the white ruling class of the Republican Party rejecting people who don't look and think like them and saying that those people deserve death and exile.
And if it couldn't get any worse, during that visit, he also found a way to hit out at Zoran Mamdani as well.
Of course.
Threatening to arrest him, literally threatening to arrest him, and also calling him a communist as well, didn't he, Nikki?
Yeah. Zoran Mamdani is not a communist.
Nope.
He is a democratic socialist. I know the term socialism sounds scary to a lot of people, but it is basically like democratic socialism is really the equivalent of like what y'all have in the UK. It's like, yeah, you have publicly funded goods that people have access to and are supported by a democratic electoral system. It's not that. And the reason they're threatening to have him arrested is because they've decided that because he's Muslim, he must be a terrorist.
Yeah.
It just defies reality, and I think it really just it boggles the mind that, to me particularly, that people can like jump to those types of conclusions and connections. And I know a lot of it is really cynical, but I would highly recommend that people listen to the interview Mamdani gave to NPR this week, where he talks a lot about this, about what that experience has been like and what he thinks about all the sort of labels and accusations that are being thrown at him right now, of, you know, the media and Republicans trying to define him not only as a politician but as a person and what he really stands for. Because I think he has a very unique and refreshing attitude, not only to campaigning but to governance, that I think is speaking to a lot of the frustrations that people have with the like electoral and political system right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, NPR, check it out.
I find it spectacular and enraging in the same amounts that Americans, mostly Republicans, who find someone who is on the other end of the political spectrum to them, whenever they want to use a throwaway insult, this word communist comes out.
Yeah, we're all communists.
And it's enraging because, but I wonder if it sticks. Like, does this insult actually stick and convince independents, for example, people who don't necessarily know who they want to vote for? Do they hear things like, "Oh, this person's a communist"? They know they don't like communists, you know, because of the past. And
the past.
Yeah, the past.
Red Scare politics.
We'll go past that, but the past. And it sticks, and it means that they vote towards Republicans. I don't know that. I wonder if you do.
To an extent, it does, absolutely. But I think the attitude Mamdani has adopted, which is, again, he's like campaigning to New York. His voters are in New York, not necessarily at the national level. And there are differences between like a national campaign and a more like local campaign. But he is really taking the attitude that, you know, people are going to throw all these words at me. They're going to, he says it in his interview with NPR, where he's like, yeah, if the only thing I knew about me was the descriptions of me that are currently being played on like Fox News, which is that I'm like a communist jihadist who wants to destroy New York, I'd also be terrified. But what he says is that his job is to get in front of voters and actually introduce himself, to be like, this is what I believe. You may not necessarily agree with all of my platform, but you might agree with some of my platform, and I'm happy to like explain to you why I believe these things, and I'm happy to hear what you would like me to do for you. And I think Mamdani is being very smart in, instead of getting really hung up on like trying to win the national narrative of like, no, I'm not that, I'm not this, focusing on campaigning to New Yorkers, to the people who are actually going to vote in his election, and ensuring that at the local level, his campaign is being louder than the like national Fox News segment that is speaking to like voters in Iowa about how like, oh, Mamdani's a communist, you know?
Right then, some time for some listener questions, I think. Let's go with this one first from David Bunce, who asked this on our Patreon chat community. You remember, if you sign up to our Patreon £5 a month tier, you can get access to that. David asks, with the big, beautiful bill, is there any sense a plan for how the government is planning on spending the insane amounts of money they are asking for, i.e. project management, etc.? It seems like an amount that is so high it couldn't actually be spent, like giving a toddler £5 million. Nikki, what do you think?
I mean, yes, there is a sense of it. The thing here is that basically the way the budgetary process works in like the US government is you have all these subcommittees who produce like individual budget bills related to various topics. Like you'll have a bill for like the agriculture committee that like funds everything related to agriculture, a bill for the defense department. And then those bills all typically get packaged together into an omnibus. There is a lot of funding stuff in this bill. Congress kind of requires that you delineate where most of these things are going to go out to. It's called the appropriations process. You're like appropriating money to individual things. So I know like the Department of Defense is getting over $100 billion. Part of that is going to go toward recruitment efforts. Part of it is going to fund the beginning of the construction of the Golden Dome that Trump wants to build, which is an air missile defense system similar to Israel's Iron Dome, which people have said, like, geographically, the United States and Israel are very different, and this is probably a really inefficient way to construct our air missile defense systems, which we already have. We already have really robust air missile defense systems. DHS is getting a shit ton of money for ICE to up border patrol stuff, new recruits for ICE agents. DHS is also getting a shit ton of money to keep building, Trump's big, beautiful wall at the border. So we know where a lot of this money is going. It's basically just like diving into the nitty gritty and figuring out like, okay, if I'm interested in this specific area of policy, is there money going there? But the DHS and DOD funding is probably like the two biggest line items outside of the Medicaid stuff and the SNAP cuts. Those are two of the big ticket items that people are looking at in this legislation, is how much money is going to sort of like the deportation and militarization efforts in the United States.
Okay. Let's move on to, I think we've got time for one more. So let's do this question from Rowan on Blue Sky, which is a pretty broad one. Says, what should ordinary people be doing in America? I just saw this tweet comparing this to Nazi Germany, and it really implies we should all be taking action. What do you think? Any ideas?
Don't preemptively concede defeat. That's the biggest thing. The administration is testing out all of the ways that they can criminalize dissent. But a lot of the ways that you can dissent have not yet been criminalized, and you should not concede that ground before you have to. Insofar as we exist in this current system, Americans still live in a representative government. If you have a member of Congress, you are perfectly within your rights to call their office and tell them you don't like this legislation, to protest their town halls, to protest events they go to let them know that you do not like this legislation. It works. That's what tanked the efforts in 2017 to repeal the Affordable Care Act. The very infamous John McCain giving the thumbs down. It was because the bill was bad and there were several Republicans who thought like the legislation was bad, but it was also because there was a massive organized effort by the public and by like activist groups and, healthcare industries to push back against that legislation and to say publicly to lawmakers, like, hey, if you vote for this, not only are you fucking us over, we're going to kick you out of office. You still, as a voter, have the ability to make your voice heard, to pressure your elected officials. I know it always sounds stupid, but like voting and getting out there and encouraging candidates who actually align with your beliefs to not only run, but like supporting their campaigns. If there is a candidate that you like in your area, canvass for them, volunteer. Like the worst thing you can do is become like agnostic or like apathetic to the political process. Because like apathy to overreach is what lets authoritarianism gain more ground in the context of a lot of other things. But if people just start checking out and saying, oh, well, there's nothing I can do, that is conceding defeat. And you should not concede defeat until it is actually like, until you're out of options.
Yeah, exactly. And my answer would be a very short but obvious one, which is basically mirroring Nikki. But look at what Kat Abu Ghazal is doing. Your real life friend, Nikki, and friend of the
My real life
podcast.
friend.
She saw something she didn't like. And she wanted to change it, and so she got involved and put herself forward, and is doing very well. We may add.
Doing very well.
She's I think she's second in the polls in her race, and is it something like 8% or 10% behind, which for someone who doesn't have a career in politics is very good.
She's killing it.
Exactly. So yeah, my answer would be, if you don't like something, get involved and try and make change. Exactly.
Get in there. There's a ton of money in politics.
Yeah, but don't do it for that. Don't do it for the money, Nikki. Come on now.
I could never run. I've said too much shit.
You could give it a go. You never know.
I'd give it a go.
I'd vote.
Yeah.
Listeners, thanks for those questions. We do, I promise, try to get to all of them every week, but it just so happens that we have so much to say that we run out of time to answer them. So
we should do a grab bag sometime.
We should, and we will.
Yeah.
We will do a Q&A. How about that? We promise we'll take some of the questions we've missed and we'll do a Q&A just for you. But do keep sending your questions in, because even if we don't answer them, it informs what we talk about, and also it's just nice to know people are there. That's always nice. Anyway, that brings us to the end of this episode of American Friction. Nikki, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you so much, Tommy.
Thank you, Tommy. I don't know where Tommy is, actually. He was sat there. Now he's gone. So I guess
now he's gone.
I suppose we should say thanks to Jav and Simon, who aren't here, but we'll be back next week when they've stopped taking pictures of Slovenian supermarkets, I guess.
Simon is not in a Slovenian supermarket.
Anyway, and a big thanks to all you listeners as well who make all of this worthwhile. Remember to back us on Patreon. It really helps us, and it's really easy to sign up as well. Search American Friction Podcast Patreon, or go to patreon.com/American Friction directly. There's a link in the show notes. And also a quick reminder, if you enjoy what we're doing, please do rate and review us wherever you're listening to the show, especially if you've been listening to us from the very start. Go and give us 5 stars. I've been Chris Jones. She's been Nikki McCann Ramirez, and you've been listening to American Friction. Speak to you again sometime.